Hey everyone, my name is Austin. I'm a senior product designer here at GitLab, and today for my UX showcase, I wanted to talk about the topic of unshipping. I want this to be a fun discussion, so I'm going to try and limit my presentation to give us opportunity to talk about things that we might be able to unship from GitLab in the future. So in the spirit of that, let's start talking about some things that we could consider taking out of the product. And where this whole idea came from for me is back when Arc was sharing some tweets around some attributes that they were removing out of their product. The specific features aren't so much what's important, but what I wanted to highlight is that they are trying to realize that unshipping is all about making some really tough calls. And to do that, like it leads to bringing a more sculpted down product, is what their CEO is saying, brings the down more to its essence. And what's interesting about Arc, similar to GitLab as like a platform, it just continues to grow. And GitLab has grown over the years. So one thing that I think is unique that Arc has been doing is they have been highlighting in their release notes what they've unshipped. So if I look for unship, you'll start seeing in their release notes like what they are removing out of the product. And so they're looking for areas that are not utilized as much or ways that they could reduce kind of the clutter of their application. This is a interesting dichotomy when we think about how we've introduced the paper cuts team that's been going around and making a lot of UI improvements, where I see this as more of a like the attention to remove things out. So you don't have to fix the paper cut, you just got to remove it from the equation. Now you might be wondering like, wow, why don't we have an unshipping newsletter? We kind of do. It's our deprecations and removals page in Docs. It is telling you all the things that we are unshipping out of the product. Now, I would say just at a cursory glance from it, it's mostly just the kind of like backend services that we offer. Maybe something has gone out of general availability or it's no longer being supported and we're kind of removing those options. But one thing I just want you to pay attention to is how long it takes for something to be announced for deprecation to when it is truly removed out of the product. That's 3 years for this one. It takes a lot of time to remove out of the product. So it's a lot, it can be more challenging, I think, than just doing a paper cut where we can ship something in a milestone, taking it out takes some time. So what might I want to remove if I could unship things? Now I'm going to speak specifically around the category that I'm responsible for in navigation and settings. And here are a few ideas that I have. So specifically in settings, we have a configuration option that we created a while back in 15.1. And essentially what it's doing is if you open a link to an internal project or a private one and it goes to an image, it's first going to prompt you to log in. That's to prevent you from running into some sensitive media files. If we look at the setting itself, we can see that 99.97% keep this on, which means that 0.03% have it off. This adds complexity to our application. We don't necessarily need this. If we relied on our convention over configuration principle, this would tell us that we are serving almost every user in GitLab. There is a possibility we're going to upset a very small minority of users by doing this, but it does relieve some of the burden on our product, on our designers, on our engineers, on our product managers to think through all the logistics of this. In a similar vein, we also have a setting around hiding default emoji reactions. Now, the spirit of this change, I totally understand. It was to try and best embody our code of conduct, to try and avoid conflicting with it. We want this to be a welcoming place. But what's funny to me about this feature is it doesn't remove the ability to just add a thumbs up or thumbs down. It just removes them as the options by default. Again, very, very low percentage of users actually turn off the option to show those default emojis. So really, what value is it adding to our product to continue to keep this in? One more setting option. Unicode characters, they are a security risk, especially when there are hidden ones. So we added in a configuration to warn users when those unwanted characters are there, when those hidden things are in the code that might be trying to sneak by, maybe do some injection. Again, you can even see like 99.9% have chosen to keep this on. Why are we offering something that is a less secure option that is only serving 0.01? Ideally, I think initially, if we had thought about this ahead of time, these would just have shipped as the default experience and we would have never given a backdoor to do the other thing. But we have the opportunity to go back and reflect upon, can we just set the convention as opposed to adding configuration to the product? So there's three settings that I would consider unshipping if I could tomorrow. One related to navigation. This one's a little bit of a personal one to me because it's just been kind of a headache to figure out where do I fit this next badge. But the user flow around getting to GitLab Next is funny. And even just what users would expect of this badge, you'll get different responses. It allows you to use our Canary infrastructure is more or less the outcome of it. But you go into user profile, you hit switch to GitLab Next, you get redirected to a different website, which then you click a toggle and you have to come back to GitLab. And then all of a sudden this pretty badge will appear. But you still don't necessarily know what the differences are in your UI. Just you're really going to get changes a couple hours in advance. And just kind of looking back in time, it looks like we were just trying to provide a way for our team to identify if someone was looking at a page that was using the Canary infrastructure. But we have so many different ways that we already are calling attention to this. You could turn on the performance bar, and you could find a little chick emoji. You could pay attention to the fave icon. If it's all gold, it's on Canary. If it looks like our normal Tanuki logo, it's not. It's in a normal production. So we already have ways to distinguish this. My idea would be to unship it out of the navigation sidebar and instead just opt for a toggle. So it's not removing it from the product necessarily, but it's streamlining it a little bit better. So it's more of a simplistic user choice. I still think there's probably room for improvement on the solution in and of itself. But again, just trying to look for ways that we can remove some of those things that maybe aren't as important all the time from the UI. You'll never make everybody happy is kind of the way this is going to play out. So I just shared a thread on Reddit where people were getting all upset because Arc is unshipping features. And you probably would see the same happen with GitLab as we take things out. That's about making those tough calls. I liked how this one contributor was sharing that, yeah, if this is affecting less than 10% of your user base and it's not just useful, it's kind of just tech debt. So I keep it in there. I wanted to share one example that I thought was really sweet. So Michael A worked on this change and it removed a page out of the application and it deferred the search into global search, which is awesome because now we're using just one thing as opposed to two. We're just using one search function as opposed to two. We removed a page, streamlining functionality together. A really cool example that I found around unshipping. And so I want to pose to all of you, if you have any ideas of things that you would like to unship. And if you really cannot think of anything that you could possibly unship, then here's my challenge for you. You could go to our pajamas documentation, you could scroll down and you could lean on this little guideline. Try not to use text only and icon only buttons in the same context, or you could also look for the one that says not to use like text alongside a label. So look for those buttons that have a icon and a label and consider unshipping either the label or the icon itself. They should be able to stand independently without the need for both. So that's all I got for unshipping. I'm gonna jump into the agenda now. Chad had left a few thoughts, it looks like, before jumping out to his conflicting meeting. If anybody wants to vocalize one of those for him, or if someone wants to talk about the first one. Let's see who.
I can probably bring up what you were sharing. Yeah. So Chad and I mean, the focus for the paper cuts team, if I'm not wrong, is the search functionality in upcoming milestones. And so Chad and I, we were discussing about the search thing in relation to pipelines as well in our design buddy chats. So his first point here is tabs on issues, MRs, etc., search pages. I just want to add to that also the tabs on the pipeline and job list view. I would definitely propose taking them away because they have just been there since a very long time, and probably when we did not have we did not have search at all for those pages. So now it's very conflicting. We have to like think of a lot different scenarios when the search results, like how they would pan out when you go on changing the tabs, and it's not the best experience that we're providing there. Adding to that, also like the charts that we show on the analytics page, But Gina is already working on that, so those are taken care of. The next point that he has is focus mode for boards. He says that he would want to look at analytics for it if it ever gets used. And then find file button on the repo page. This is just a global search, sort of a QXML if we need that button there. I don't know if
that makes
somebody
sense.
has, anything to add to that.
Yeah, Jeremy, looks like you wanted to maybe add a point. Focus mode anywhere. Yeah, you want to talk about focus mode at all, Jeremy?
Well, yeah, I just it's something that, like, on the editor, it exists, but it's clunky. And so if we're not going to pay attention to it or improve it, like, what's the value of it being there?
Yeah, fair point. Those have a lot of different ideas. So I'm gonna stick to the ones that have gotten some reactions to them. Marcel, you know, talk about the spicy one, groups.
Of course. I think quite a few of all of you have already heard me talk about this. But I think groups were an amazing MVC, and it has definitely brought us forward faster than some of our competitors who didn't have any solutions for all of the 4 things that groups do, besides a few more. But I think they're also holding us back in a major way. And that's because we are trying to stuff too much into what groups do. And that's leading to them not really being focused. That's leading to conflicting. So then when somebody uses them for teams, they actually create problems for access management. When somebody uses them for cascading settings policies, that actually creates problems for visualization of hierarchy, and it doesn't really fit how people think about it. I've also written a longer comment to try to collect some of my thoughts, because I've had so many discussions with all of you. Special thanks to Mike Nichols, who told me a lot more about how they work in the background and what their teams are thinking about it. And this also came up especially in the last year during the plan redesign sessions, where we had a lot of fun thinking about how could this actually work correctly. And so try to summarize some of it. So if anybody wants to jump in and see more background than what I've been saying here, that might be interesting for you.
Yeah, amazing. Thanks for that reference. I remember we had a working group a few years back around simplifying groups and projects, which feels similar to trying to like unship that concept. But yeah, that would certainly be a big one of trying to figure out how to unship that. That's not just like unshipping a button somewhere. That's unshipping how some of our structure of the site itself. So that would be very challenging. So appreciate you linking that. Looks like we had some agreement around fluid layouts. Jeremy, Nick, either one of you want to chime in there?
Yeah, I think we looked at that at some point, and similar to some of the analytics you shared, it was in that like less than 5% range. It feels like an opportunity to just sort of bridge the gap, have one layout, and then, not run into those weird edge cases where something breaks in fluid layout. That'd be great.
Yep, definitely. I know I experienced a lot of the challenges of trying to design around fluid and fixed layouts when we were changing the navigation structure, because it caused some challenges with breakpoints and all those fun things. So many great options. I think, what is our limit? 15 minutes, Chris, right?
Yeah, you're at 15 minutes, so you've got 5 more.
Okay, 5 more. Great. I'm not seeing any other emojis specifically, but if someone else would like to speak up and share one of theirs, or if they want to talk about something they've seen unshipped already, that's cool too.
I want to bring up pipeline minigraft. That's something that I cannot really very clearly make a case against, because if you go to the statistics, I mean the data that's there, users interact with that a lot. That's the most interacted with element on the pipeline list view. But I still have like strong ideas that that's not providing the value that it requires to provide to users. Just to get to the root cause for a failed job, one has to, if one is using the pipeline minigraph, they have to perform like 4 clicks, go to 2 different pages, and then use a feature that's available on the logs page to see what's causing their pipeline to fail. And that's definitely not an ideal experience. So even though this is something that is highly used by users, I would still like recommend we present something that's more valuable to them.
Yeah, it sounds like you want to shortcut them to the value sooner.
Yes.
Yeah, I see you're trying to go with that. Yeah.
Austin, I'm curious if, well, first of all, I love all your examples. I love the settings examples, especially as you're working through settings. Super awesome to see that. I was curious if you were open to moving your issues from your personal project to the GitLab project and then kicking off some conversations with the related teams.
Oh yeah, definitely. That was my plan. I was just burying the lead a little bit with my presentation. As soon as it becomes an issue in GitLab, it can't get really deleted. It only gets closed, and then I gotta go fight the badge label maker, and So yeah, I'll get around to it. And I think what I would love to do is even take some of these ideas and perhaps even construct an epic to help illustrate all the different ideas that we have around unshipping different topics, and that could give us a place to start or a place that will sit in our epic/issue backlog graveyard. Either way, yes, my plan is to take the inspiration items out of this UX showcase and move them there.
You can see as well that I just added a few comments here related to that. Just it was very topical in the last product leadership team meeting, the first that I attended, this topic of deprecations. Fabian Zimmer shared a list of deprecations. So I don't know if you're in touch with him, but I guess if there's a movement or a stronger effort, which it sounds like there's interest, at least within the PLT group, to start addressing sort of how, or managing sort of how we deal with deprecations, he might be the person to talk to. And then just generally, yeah, I'm kind of curious how I can be helpful, just not really understanding fully how to affect change and how we would take a topic like this from our UX showcase and move it forward.
Yeah, that's a great question. Well, I can tell you from my personal experience is that I do hear a lot of product leaders talk about the idea of removing. They love that concept, but even as I was showing like in our release notes, it takes a long time to deprecate and remove specifically like a feature out of the product, which requires investment from all facets, product, engineering, UX. That is usually pretty hard to negotiate. So on the leadership side of things, I think advocating and giving priority to that would give us the space to work on those problems, but they rarely get prioritized because it's less enticing than shipping something new, which is somehow how we've ended up with the product that we have now. Product that's just grown over time from a lot of contributions. So Fabian's a great resource for sure. And yeah, we'll definitely try and connect if we need to.